Alright everyone, people have only been asking for this video since before I even started this series. So finally, after much waiting, it's time. What if Orca beat Queen Coral in the duel for the throne? Before we get started, I am running a sale right now in my store. Everything is 15% off, and you can find all my Neat Wings of Fire merch there by following a link in the description. Also, Dogs Lover Likes Doge already has a what if on this subject, and I have not seen it, so I think it'll be really interesting to go watch it after I write this and see if either of our ideas resemble each other, or if they are completely different. I just reread book 2, so for once I actually know what's going on with the timeline I'm entering, so without any further ado, let's get this party started. Orca didn't want to admit it to herself, but she thought she'd almost lost this fight. Even with her powers, there had been a moment when Mother's narwhal tail adornment had whistled past her underbelly, so close she could feel its ridged edges scrape ever so slightly over her scales. The near miss sent a burst of energy through her, galvanizing her to whirl and attack while her mother was off balance from her failed attack. Orca's claws, enchanted that morning for speed, accuracy, and sharpness, sank deep into her mother's neck. After that, their lengthy fight was over. Orca snapped the former queen's neck and stepped back one of the youngest queens in Sea Wing history. Orca had no sisters, though she had a few brothers, and Coral had no other female relatives, at least none close enough to be a threat to Orca, which meant she had full power over her throne. And Orca proved quickly that she planned to keep it. She allowed Gil, her father, to remain at the palace. He was good at some of the boring parts of being queen, though their relationship had grown frosty since her ascension to the throne. This was to be expected, of course, but she knew he would never attack her. Not because he didn't want to, no, but because there was a collar of coral enchanted to keep him from harming her in any way, and it wouldn't be coming off any time soon. Blister was the next dragon to address. Orca wasn't sure she cared about the Sandwings' little squabble. It had distracted her family for her entire life, but Orca hadn't really formed an opinion on it beyond annoyance. It wasn't a Sea Wing problem, was it now? Blister didn't see it that way, and she attempted to make the war a Sea Wing problem. At least, until Orca enchanted a set of 12 shark's teeth and left them on the coast. Any Sandwings who ventured too far into the ocean found themselves attacked by razor-sharp, lightning-fast flying somethings, and soon rumors began to spread that the sea itself was haunted. Of course it wasn't, but Orca wanted Blister and her army out, and so out they would stay. Despite her father's misgivings, Orca began to find that she felt a fierce, possessive protectiveness over her tribe. The Sea Wings belonged to her. She had won for them. The rest of the world dissolved into chaos, and Orca turned her focus on restoring the Sea Wings to greatness. Once the rest of the tribes, war-weary and out of resources, finally finished battering each other into the ground, the Sea Wings would find themselves the only tribe with any power to speak of. And it would all be thanks to her. Orca grew older and the Sea Wings grew to like her. Unlike Coral, Orca would focus on someone other than herself. She could put her actual kingdom first, instead of silly scrolls and sillier wars. So focused was she on running her kingdom that she might not have heard about the debacle with the Skywings at all had a gaggle of 5 dragonettes not been hauled in one day by her guards. The Dragonettes of Destiny, they called themselves. Only, Orca knew from the start they weren't exactly what they claimed. For one, they were missing a Skywing. And apparently a Sandwing too, because this one had gotten through her border spells just fine, and that had never happened once. How curious, Orca thought. A hybrid, or some kind of trickery? She kept that observation to herself. If the Dragonettes didn't know, she certainly wouldn't be the one to inform them. No, she was far more interested in their Sea Wing, and the royal patterns spiraling along her deep blue wings. Tsunami, her little sister was called, and judging by her attitude, she was nobody to sit back and ignore the possibility of a throne. They had come to her to hide after accidentally killing the Skywing Queen. Supposedly, they planned to meet the other two Sandwing sisters and pick a ruler to end the war. Orca had decided quite some time ago that she didn't particularly want the war to end. The Seawings grew stronger while the other tribes weakened. The longer this went on, the better. And here were the Dragonets of Destiny, the biggest chance the world had seen in 2 decades of ending the war. Orca welcomed them and sent them to a guest cave in the summer palace to sleep for the night, and she spent the evening planning and considering her options. What did she want? Well, for the war to continue another 20 years, maybe, and for this new threat to her throne to go away. Orca knew how to make that happen. She could drown 2 birds with 1 claw if she played her cards right. She had only to make sure of one possible danger before she knew she was safe. The next day, she invited Tsunami to take lunch with her, apart from her friends. Orca noticed some sour looks exchanged when Tsunami accepted, and she smiled. There were already cracks in their friendship. That would only make this easier. As they ate, they talked about the Seawings. Eventually, Orca steered the conversation toward the royal family, reminiscing on their mother and telling Tsunami about Gil, her father. Gil was currently in the other palace. Orca had tired of his glares and sent him there to cool off for a bit. Tsunami was eager to hear about her family. "Did you know," Orca said eventually, as if the thought had only just crossed her mind, "that our family is said to have magic bloodlines?" "Really?" Tsunami asked, looking up from the crab she was poking at. "Like animus powers?" "Yes," Orca said. "That's how they built the summer palace." "Huh," Tsunami said, looking around as if seeing the palace anew. "I always kind of thought those were just stories. Magic powers, I mean," she scoffed. Orca hummed. "So then you've never discovered any yourself?" she asked. "Ha, no," Tsunami laughed. "I don't need magic." Orca heard herself laughing along with her sister, playing along. "Oh, silly," she said. "Have you ever done the test?" "What test?" Tsunami asked. Orca tutted. "I guess Webb's ignored that too," she simpered. "All Seawing Dragonets take the Animus test when they're young, to find out if they've any powers of their own. But you could do it now if you wanted to. It's so easy." Tsunami tilted her head. "I mean, I guess," she said. "I don't think I'm an Animus, though." It didn't sound like she was hiding anything, but Orca had to be sure. Even if her sister didn't know she had powers, if she did and she discovered them in the middle of their fight, Orca would be in real trouble for the first time in years. "It's easy," Orca said again, and she knew she'd hooked her sister when Tsunami straightened minutely. "Then I can do it," she said confidently. "What am I doing?" "Here," Orca said, holding up a bit of fish. "Just hold this and command it to do something." "That's it?" Tsunami asked, taking the scrap from her sister. Orca shrugged. "I think so. If you have them, you have them." "Huh," Tsunami said again. "Okay." She looked at the fish. Fish, go back from my claws to the dish." The scrap didn't even quaver, and Orca felt a grin spreading across her face. "Well," she said, perhaps a little gleefully, "I guess you aren't one of us after all." Tsunami barely had time to show her confusion before Orca had snapped at the water in the pool she was lying in to flow up around her and hold her still. Tsunami struggled, eyes widening in rage, and tried to free herself, but she could not. Ignoring her sister for a moment, Orca reached up to her neck, unwinding one delicate string of pearls from it and pulling it off. "Oh, sister," she said, false sympathy dripping from her words. "Poor little lost sister. You really ought to have something from the Seawings. Something from the family." Tsunami snarled, the sound muted by the water that covered even her snout. Orca clutched the pearls in her talons. "Pearls," she commanded. "I enchant you so that whoever wears you will not be able to remove you. Also, whoever wears these pearls will attack the Dragonets of Destiny and claim that nobody but they shall have any power over the future of Pyria." Her sister had frozen at those words, horror shining in her wide eyes. Orca pushed the water down from her neck, leaving only a thin band around her throat and horns to keep her from moving. "No," Tsunami gasped, gills fluttering rapidly as Orca carried the pearls closer. No, no, please. Her voice stopped as Orca clasped the pearls around her scales. Tsunami's eyes glazed over. She stopped fighting. Water, return to the pool, Orca commanded lazily. The moment she was free of the water's grasp, Tsunami whirled and dashed to the edge of their level, returning quickly to the place where they'd left the other 4 dragonettes of destiny behind. Orca counted to 50 before she followed. She started hearing shouting at 22. Below, on the sands, Tsunami was wrestling with a big mudwing, howling incoherently as sea wings flocked to the scene in horror. Orca noted that she had already killed one of them. The rainwing lay unmoving on the sand, neck twisted at a gruesome angle. The strange yellow not-sandwing was next to the body, shouting frantically. Orca wondered, briefly, why Tsunami had gone for the rainwing first. Below, her sister pushed off the mudwing and spun, clawing the nightwing and pulling him down to the sand before he could escape. Orca dove off the edge of her level and swept down, barreling into Tsunami right as she sank her blue claws deep into his underbelly. "Tsunami!" Orca shouted as her sister thrashed beneath her claws. "Tsunami, what are you doing? I thought these were your friends!" "Never!" Tsunami howled, voice cracking from the strain. "Let me go!" She wriggled, trying to escape her sister to get back at the mudwing, who was frozen in the sand, trembling. He looked like he didn't know what to look at. The 2 bodies, or Tsunami, raging and captured by the Sea-Wing Queen. Internally, Orca smiled. This was going perfectly. "Stop, sister, please!" she shouted, twisting to keep holding Tsunami down. She could have maintained her grip, but she allowed Tsunami to kick her off after a moment. She sprawled in the turned-up sand, which gave her sister just enough time to dart at the sandwing, who was crying now in confusion and panic. Orca didn't let her get much of a head start. She darted after Tsunami, clawing at her tail and wings, shredding through those hated royal symbols on the delicate blue membrane. Tsunami had clawed the sandwing once before she got away, Orca keeping her sister from following by pinning her back to the sand. "You have to stop!" Orca shouted again for the benefit of the crowds now gathered. "Tsunami!" Tsunami, of course, did not stop. Orca knew it was time. She drew the knife sheathed on her back leg quickly and used it to slit her sister's throat. Tsunami gasped and kept struggling for a few moments, but quickly lost her fight. "Sister," Orca said, stepping back and letting the knife fall to the ground. "No," the mudwing said brokenly, limping over. "Tsunami." I don't understand," the sandwing whimpered, crawling back. "Why would she would never." "I'm sorry," Orca said gravely. "I should have stopped her. She told me she didn't want to be in the prophecy, that she wanted to stay here, but you didn't want her to stay. I told her she was welcome back home, and she told me you would never let her, but if I'd known she would do this—" Orca stopped. "No," the mudwing whispered again. "I know she hated the prophecy, but—" He trailed off brokenly. Orca stood straighter. "Guards," she called, and a few of her Sea-Wing guards ran up. "Clear this," she said, "and help those 2 back to their rooms. They need time to rest." She turned away from the dragonettes, who didn't seem to see her. "My sister," she said quietly, looking at Tsunami's body. That had its intended effect on the crowd. Most Sea-Wings looked sympathetic for the queen who'd just been forced to kill her only sister. "I must go," she said, and took off, flying for her private quarters. That took care of both her problems. Orca's throne was safe, and so was the war. The Sea-Wings would be healthy and prosperous for years to come, and she would be here to lead them through it all. All right, that turned out so dark. I feel like I say this about all my what-ifs, and I had kind of planned for this one to end with Orca being hated and assassinated, but I felt like that was so boring, and then honestly this one kind of wrote itself. Like, it occurred to me Coral was pretty neglectful of her kingdom, and I think Orca would have wanted to one-up her there until she actually became sort of a good queen, at least for the Sea-Wings. Not that she's a good dragon, necessarily, but she's doing a lot of good for her tribe? Anyways, what do y'all think? Would Orca be a good queen or a bad queen? How do you think Clay and Sunny are going to cope with being the only 2 remaining Dragonettes of Destiny? If only you were a Patreon, because Patreons are actually going to get a little sneak peek of what Sunny and Clay are going to do after all this. If you enjoyed this What If, go ahead and check out the one Dogs Lover Likes Doge did too. I'm fixing to go watch it to see how different they both are. Or you can watch my other What Ifs, since I've got plenty of topics to choose from by now. Don't worry, they don't all end this sadly. And of course, don't forget to check out my store, where you can find all kinds of neat merch like bookmarks, pins, prints, my Wings of Fire playing cards, and all that jazz. Like I said earlier, I'm running a sale this week with 15% off everything in my store using code SUMMER. The sale will run from today until Wednesday the 24th, so if you're interested in checking that out, there is a link in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and y'all have a wonderful week.